Greetings and welcome. Today's episode on Geeks First is all about the Dynasty, or shall we say, the Dynasty. How do you pronounce it? All that and more on today's TCG News. I am around. Welcome back. I hope this week has found you well. This is going to be a different episode than our standard TCG News. Today we're going to be covering the Dynasty articles that have been released that I have been kind of simmering all the information from across various different lands, and I would like to go ahead and talk about everything that is here. So, in a perfect world, you're about to see me go one step smaller and two steps smaller. Wow, look at that! It's like I kind of know what I'm doing now. You want to see something even more fun? I'm gone. And I'm back. I'm sorry, this editing thing is just super fun. Dynasty, or Dynasty depending on who you're speaking with, will release on November 11th, 2022. There has been some interesting articles that have been released so far, and there's several speculative type things that we can review today, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to try to keep this video somewhat short, but if it does go on for a while, there will be timestamps below so you can skip around to the parts that might interest you the absolute most. First and foremost is the addition of the Marvel card face and the regular card face option of our equipment, meaning that you can hit these trinkets, or as they're referring to them, Relics of War, which is going to add a new level of rarity. I believe Bronson has referred to it as a lottery ticket style of card that may not only look awesome, but entice the collector to purchase a little bit more. So, there's that. Interestingly enough, with the whole Dynasty artwork and the booster packs, I mean, this is pretty sweet. It's a rustic look. It screams, I want to just buy as much of this as possible. Even though it's not draftable, I feel like there's some pretty interesting tidbits that can be taken away from this. With the dragon logo, this reminds me of like a Game of Thrones style of idea. And because the fact that they say EN in the bottom corner, it makes me question or wonder whether or not this will be released in multi-languages. We already know that they did this with the history packs. It could very well be that they do that with Dynasty as well. The next interesting piece we're going to touch on is going to be the Dynasty data sheet, which is basically going to give us a little bit of the information that you'll see here. This is going to kind of showcase what Dynasty has to offer. Again, we have the release date of 11/11/2022, and we see the wonderful, very interesting dual-class Emperor here. I am very excited that Flesh and Blood has gone down the path of going with dual-class heroes, because it literally opens the door for a perpetual set of heroes for forever. There has been some talk of like Living Legend status on a couple other videos recently of the speed at which people were reaching Living Legend. I was actually concerned that my favorite class, Mechanologist, or maybe it's technically a talent, that's up for debate, but that particular setup, if she wins frequently, there is enough points that she could technically hit Living Legend before maybe we see the next non-draftable set, which would come out after this, and I think Q3 2023, that may or may not have any Mechanologist cards. So technically, because she's the only one in that class that has one, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole too far, but you get what I'm saying. There could be some opportunities in the future where things just don't line up as people might think. So some of the most interesting things about the Flesh and Blood Dynasty set is that it's going to be an expansion set for every hero class. That means that we're going to have every hero class that has been from WTR, Arcane Rising, well, technically Crucible War did not release any new classes, but you have Monarch and Tales of Aria, so you have, and now Uprising. Well, yeah, technically that's it. So does this also mean that the Merchant's going to get in there? Does this mean that Yorick is going to have a little bit of Bard assistance? Will there be an introduction of a new class? So again, that new class, is it the Samurai? There's a cool photo we'll get to in a second that I'm not quite sure, but he's definitely something, and it's not a Bard. Maybe it's an assassin, maybe it's an alchemist, but again, I don't think those are quite correct. You can find out more about that on the lore channel. Fablorian, we're going to be releasing some more content over there. It's going to have a little bit of talk where we go into some of that. But it is a non-draftable set here where you're going to have pretty much a larger card pool. So after this, I will have some data a little bit later in this video that I've already tried to pre-calculate based on additional earlier sets. That's why this video took a little bit to come out, about kind of what the breakdown of rarity is going to be, whether the 51 Majestics, 81 Rares, and 109 Commons are going to be between multiple classes, how many I expect of kind of each one, and if there is a new class that's going to kind of be injected into everything right away, you kind of have to have this level set of where does that class fall, and can it be competitive immediately, or is it not designed to be competitive? So you have to ask these questions about, can they physically fit that singular class in here, or is this a bolt-on to something else? Next on this is that the MSRP of this product is actually a tidbit more than it was in prior supplemental sets. You'll notice that it's now $109.90, which basically means with a 20% off that it's still going to be sub $100, but depending on how people bite into this when it comes out, you might see these spike. I am very happy to see that they did keep the paper wrapper, which means that they are thinking green going forward, so that's very exciting. And you'll notice here that the Crown of Dominion is one of the legendary pieces, so we now know 2 of the 5 legendaries, because the Emperor, which I'll show here in a second, is one of those legendaries, which means that there's also this Marvel card face that is the same item, but it's in Marvel. And you'll notice that also Dynasty 234 is where the legendary Crown of Dominion is. That means that up to the set, typically based on set compilation, you have each class that kind of goes, and then generics are toward the end. So if we know that toward the end, 234, which this comes into some of my math later, is the first or maybe second legendary, possibly, of the generic slot, that means that there's a limited amount of generics that are available in this set, which isn't a bad thing, but it's something to consider. All right. Purple. Purple Nurple. 3, 2, 1. Unable to connect. Error. The Emperor of Drakai is in the set, and interestingly enough, we now have him shown here as one of the articles released. So if we scroll down, there's some lore. There is a couple more interesting pieces. One will be released here on October 31st. Don't really know what that's going to be. And then there's another article here called The One Emperor. There are some highlights that it's talked about within here when it specifically mentions Command and Conquer and Dual Class, and you'll notice that below you'll see this kind of round robin of cards that are here. So let's first kind of talk about some of this. Interestingly enough, Command and Conquer is shown as one of the highlighted cards for the new set. However, when you hover over the card and you look at it, it is actually showing the Arcane Rising version of this card. Does that mean there'll be a re-release of this card? I don't know. But one of the things James White did mention is that for every release of a card, typically they try to produce the highest quality of that card, most collectible first, and then continue to go down from there. So that might mean that the original Command and Conquer might be on an art reserve list or something of that effect or similar, which means that we could maybe see a Command and Conquer that would come out, but maybe it has different artwork for this set specifically, or a wild, crazy idea, maybe it gets downshifted into a rare so that way people have more access to it. The card is pretty expensive at this point, and I understand that the collectors want to keep their originals, so that'll maybe drive the price up there, but maybe Command & Conquer is downshifted to a rare. Haven't heard anybody think of that, but who knows? Anything's possible. You do have the Crown, which is one of the next cards that's listed here. You have the gold piece, which is specific to kind of the copper, silver, and gold. So I have been very, very much awaiting when this was going to come out. I actually thought it was going to come out in Everfest. Everfest came out with silver. In this case, now we have the gold, so that's amazing. Now we have the full set. I'm going to collect as much of these as I can because I just think they're unique and cool. I also like the fact that it is 2 resources, destroy, draw a card, go again. So there's plenty of these, and it does interact with older cards, so that's kind of neat too. The Imperial Warhorn is a Majestic card that's a legendary, one of, and it lets the Emperor pick the cards that he will be kind of sacrificing in this regard. Kind of an interesting concept, but it is to do with the royal tag that is on the Emperor. Now, there probably will be other cards in this set that will be released, if I had to take a wild guess, that are not necessarily classed as royal, but have a do this effect, but if you're royal, do plus more. In Magic the Gathering, this was referred to as a kicker, or some sort of addendum, that basically allowed you to have the card, but be even better if you paid additional or were a part of something. So maybe that's the route that they're taking. Who knows? Another really awesome thing is that the Emperor of Drakai also has a really cool lore article, so let's check that out. As you scroll through the lore article, you're going to notice As you scroll through the lore article, you're going to notice that there's quite a bit of interesting information that's within this article. Now, I've read over this, and I highly recommend that you read over it as well, but there are some really interesting tidbits of information that we can sink our teeth into that'll hopefully give us some indication of things that are to come. As an example, there's a photo here of the crown, and basically, I like his little quote here at the end, you know, one land, one people, one emperor. So I think it'll be a real interesting overall set if some of the information in here does come to fruition, but yeah, we'll leave it at that for right now. And none other but on the Heroes of Wrathe page, guess what we see? Next to the Emperor, we get an unnamed, very uniquely looking, cool character. This is where some people are starting to speculate that it may very well be a Dragoon, a Samurai, some sort of head of maybe the Guard. We're just going to kind of have to wait and see on that, but there's a lot of unique things. I really like his weapon. I think that is totally badass, and I cannot wait to see what that is in the set. I would like to take a second and just admire the actual artwork on the Emperor here, because it's just amazing. Also, you do have, it looks to be like the Guard on the side over here, with a similar kind of just stance. But, I mean, just this art is just mind-blowingly great. Federico, yeah, this artwork is just phenomenal. Like, I can't even, yeah, I'm excited. I had somebody that went to Pro Tour Lille basically pick me up a playmat because I was just so ecstatic to see this, and I got it signed by the artist. So shout out there, very appreciated. And now comes the time in the video where I get to show you the really weird speculative stuff that I've been trying to figure out. This is all information that I've kind of gathered, and it's not necessarily in the absolute best situation here, but I do want to share with you what I've thought of for some of the set makeups here. So I'll go ahead and make myself a little bit smaller here. I'm going to blow this up about as big as I can go, and we're going to go ahead and talk about it. So let's make myself even smaller. All right, well, we started the game with basically the Flesh and Blood version number. So we had Flesh and Blood version 1.0, which lasted all the way up until the last set was Everfest, and then they moved over to Uprising, which was the Flesh and Blood 2.0. Then I basically kept track of the set releases, whether the set was draftable, how many cards were in the set, how many Fables, Legendaries, Majestic, Super Rares, Rares, Commons, Tokens, Foil Distribution, Cold Foils, and Marvels, all within the same set. And then if you added those together, I got some more information, and then the number of classes that you had to support. So as you could see, Welcome to Wrathe had 4 classes they had to support. Arcane Rising had 4 classes to support. Crucible of War was the first supplemental set. That was in Flesh and Blood 1.0. And it was not draftable, but they did repeat these cards in History Pack. So Crucible of War, Arcane Rising, and Welcome to Wrathe all were wrapped up into History Pack 1. So I'm assuming that Monarch, Tales of Aria, and Everfest were all going to be wrapped up into History Pack 2. That'll be later down the line. I did not necessarily include History Pack in this because that is a reprint set, not individual cards. But as I continue to go forward, you'll notice that there were different 8 main. You had a Merchant and a Shapeshifter, and at that time there was no Illusionist, and that was in the Crucible of War. Now, if you move over to Monarch, you had that in Monarch, you added 3 classes of heroes, but you added the talents Light and Shadow. Those were the first real talents that kind of showed up in the game. Then after that, with Tales of Aria, you had 3 additional talents: Ice, Lightning, Earth, and technically Elemental is another generic element, but you had to be Elemental in order to leverage that. So really, there were 4 talents within that. The sets relatively remained about the same card size. Tales of Aria is 238, Monarch was 307, so it was a bigger. Crucible War was 198. So if we start looking at more of the supplemental sets, which is why this data is here, is 198 cards were in Crucible War, and then in Everfest you had 198 cards as well. You only had 3 legendaries in that set. Now in the new one we're getting 5 legendaries. We already know 2 of those. One of the legendaries in Everfest was kind of a legendary that some people were not very thrilled about, and that was the Silver Palms, the kind of legendary that helped the Merchant class, but that's really probably more geared toward PvE or something of that effect, but we're not really there just yet. So I'm wondering whether or not they're going to release anything in the new set. Now, Uprising had some data as well. I won't really go too much into that. 226 cards total, and then Dynasty has been spoiled with the card information on the data sheet to have 247 cards, 1 Fabled, 5 Legendary, 51 Majestics, 81 Rares, and 109 Commons. Now, you still get the 10 cards per pack, But the distribution, a gentleman made a good video on that. I'll link it in the comment section below. But he does talk about you'll probably need to purchase more of the cards to be able to get that. And I believe that to be true. Now, in this, because it does state that there will be all of the classes accounted for in this, we know that that's all current classes plus a new class. That means that there are 9 current classes and theoretically 1 new class, so 10 total classes. There are 8 total talents if you roll Royal up into that, or 7, and then you technically could have maybe some other dual class cards. We're not really sure just yet. The breakdown that I kind of envisioned here, and this is just maybe a stab in the dark. Let me get this spun over here. Boop, boop, boop. I love Excel and how it doesn't like to ever listen to anything you say. All right. So my breakdown for the set, as I might expect it to be, would be that generic will probably have 5 generic rares at 3 pitches apiece with 15 total, because that's about the average we've seen in the other supplemental sets, except for Crew had a little bit more. 1 of each rare, at least for Brute, Guardian, Illusionist, Mechanologist, Ninja, Ranger, Runeblade, Warrior, and Wizard. All should have at least probably 1 rare with triple pitch, so that would be at least 3 of each. Now, if there's a new class, my assumption is that in order to make it viable based on some stats from Fab Library, you'd need to look at basically about 6 rares at 3 pitch values apiece, depending on how the class functions, to make it viable to match with what's available in other card pools. If you do that, you might even have some talent cards, so we could have 7 talent cards at 3 pitches apiece. It would give a total of 21. Now, that may not all be the same, because some talents might only be Draconics or Red only, things of that effect. But we then start asking, are we going to see any Crew-era young heroes? That's one of the questions I had. Are we going to see any Crew-era weapons? Maybe alternative weapons for different game modes? I thought of something really interesting for the Dragoon guy, is maybe he has 2 weapons, kind of like 2 harmonized Kodachis, but one in the other, like it's the staff, like the upper part and the lower, and if you like get hit with the upper part, it does a different amount of damage than if you get hit with the bottom half of the weapon. So maybe the bottom half does like some effect, or like can break a shield or something, but the top half does like blunt damage, or if you do it wrong it snaps in half. And I'm assuming that this is just pure speculation, but it's just so fun to think of these things. Will we see any PvE cards in this? We might not. That might be a whole different thing. I already mentioned the alternate art CNC. Maybe there's something of that effect. Will we see maybe rares or mentors for each class, maybe even specializations for each class? And that's just kind of the general math that I came up with that gives us about that 81. Again, this is pure speculation at this point. Now, if you go over to the commons, this is where things can get kind of interesting. If you give 3 of each common type to each of the classes, and you also then put 9 commons into the new class with 3 pitches, that gives you pretty much what you're going for. However, that doesn't account for any common generics. Now, we did not have any common generics, so to speak, in Everfest, but we did have the silver, which was a common. It was still, it's like not a token, but it was a common. So if you do that and you don't have any common generics, and you relegate cut 3, 2, 1. And you relegate everything from the generics to be rares only and no common generics, because this is a supplemental set, not a core set, then basically it would probably work itself out to be maybe right. Again, just my thoughts. You look at the Majestics, this is where things can get real interesting. In a perfect world, you might have a lot of generic Majestics because they would work with other classes. We saw this with like a Race Face and Fog Down and Uprising. So maybe we get 7 unique individual generics that will help basically transform unplayable classes or classes that are performing subpar to classes that will basically allow them to compete or even leverage them with something and just mix things up. That's what a supplemental set should do, right? If you give Brute, Illusionist, Guardian, all the main classes 3 of the... oh, did I do that backwards? It says rares. No, I just didn't change it. It should say Majestics. See? I'm not perfect. if you give 3 including Merchant, to give just a couple for maybe like a PvE splash, this would give you some idea of basically what I believe to be some of the set breakdown. And that's only based on the averages from Fab Library. So let's cut over to there and I'll show you why I'm saying this. This is the card distribution on Fabrary or Fab Library, basically breaking down each class, as you can see, kind of the core and everything else. Now, I did not know that this site even existed up until about a week and a half ago. But the data that you can grab from this site is just mind-boggling with what you're able to kind of dig into. So as you look at each of these classes, you'll notice that on average there are about 100, anywhere from 70 to 100. Mechanologist is 60, and then Illusionist is 34, but Illusionist has the pie chart broken out in other areas. But on average, you have a swath of cards between about 50 and 150 is the average playable per class, with some classes having up to 150 to 250 or more cards if you look at Runeblade. So to drop a brand new class into the game, I feel like you're going to have to meet or exceed the bare bones minimum, which means Mechanologist is your basically your part to beat. And Mech right now, I feel, has been a little unloved, but maybe in the next set, especially when you go visit their home turf, we'll get some more cool stuff for them. So maybe that's why things have been lacking for the Mechanologist. That said, I think that you're probably going to see a decent chunk of the set devoted to this new hero, or new class, or maybe new classes of heroes, or dual classes of heroes, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, that's where it is. That's the information I have. Alright, and thank you so much for watching this episode today. I know it's a long-form episode, but again, hopefully some of this information finds you well. I appreciate all the information that I've gotten from other people. I've watched some videos. There's some really interesting stuff that people are speculating out there on. Again, like, share, subscribe, hit that bell icon for more content. Hopefully you like this weird green screen thing. If you like it, comment below. If you don't like it, comment below and tell me. That way I can find out what to change for next time. And until then, have a great week. All right. We're going to attempt to ship it. Greetings and welcome to this crazy edition of Jake is in 3D! Just kidding. That's going to get cut. Alright, we need to fix this. So I need to go cam 4. Aha! We have a background! And I need to disappear. So, greetings and welcome to today's video by Geeks First. I exist on a green screen! Haha! This is not your typical TCG news. It's being delivered to you today, all about the Dynasty, or should I say Dynasty, or dogs barking. They all start with a D. I need to go get them. I'll be right back.